I want to start by talking about my supply list, and sometimes it can be hard to find exactly the same supplies. So I tried to be as general as possible in talking about the brushes, for example. Now, the paint I'm using, this is Graham paint. I'm using a fast dry titanium white. I'm using cadmium yellow light. Regular titanium white, by the way, will work just as well. Quinacridone rose, burnt umber, and ultramarine blue, because this is my primary palette. But the brown obviously isn't a primary color, but I add it because brown and blue make great blacks. Now for my oils, I personally have gotten away from using all solvents, so now I'm pretty much solvent free. I just use Graham's walnut oil as my medium to clean my brushes as I'm working. And I use the walnut alkyd medium to help the paint speed up its dry time for the first layer. And it will also help change the flow, so making it a little bit more or a little less viscous, I should say, so that it moves a little bit easier. Then as I move through the painting, it's just paint. I have a palette here that's just a wooden board. I can pop this in the freezer at the end of my painting session so that the paint doesn't dry out, and then I can take it out of the freezer again afterwards. You could also put a layer of saran wrap over it. I'm using 3 different brushes. These just happen to be Royal Langnickel brushes, but any solid brush will work. Don't go for the cheapest brush you can get. You know, get yourself 3 good brushes, and then you'll be set for your painting. I've got a larger filbert brush that could be flat. It could be flat, or it could be filbert. It doesn't matter. I specified, I believe, like a 1 inch across brush, but I'm doing this on this demo on a smaller canvas, so mine might be smaller. So don't look at the size of my brushes here and stress that you don't have the right brushes. I just want something larger that I can create big color swatches with. I want something a little smaller, and I like filberts because I like that rounded edge, but if I turn it, I get a thin edge. And that's going to be for adding some of the detailed values, and I'll get into what values are in the demo. And then this is a smaller round, and this round isn't super tiny. I don't go for like zeros. I go for like, you know, a 2 or a 4. And that way I can still get a nice fine tip to make some fine details, but it's not so big that I can't put enough paint in it to make a line last. I've got a palette knife for mixing, and I'll do a little demo of how to mix with a palette knife in a separate video here in a bit. And then I just make sure I have lots of paper towel at hand, because you're going to be wiping off your brushes quite regularly. Optional items that can be helpful to have are just a razor blade that's maybe attached to something that can be used to clean off your palette when you're done. You can also, if you do it while it's still wet, which is better, you can just use a piece of paper towel that you dip in your walnut oil and wipe off your palette, and then you don't have to worry about it too much. Also, a little wooden dowel can be very helpful. I like a wooden dowel because it helps me measure how wide is the object versus how tall it is. So that's something that I like to use, is just a little wooden dowel, but you could use your brush too. That will work. The only difference is the brush is wider on one end than the other. Usually it's tapered, so that can kind of skew you. So it's up to you. Anything like this can help with measurements. And then another option is something called a liner brush. This is not something I put on my supply list, because really I only ever use this brush for signing my painting, but also because I'm working in miniature. You might see me use this for some of my little details, these little dots and lines that I'm going to be using to make these people, but you could make them just as easily with this. So I'll try and do it with this brush because I don't want to confuse the matter, but you're going to be working on a 9, hopefully a 9 by 11 or even 11 by 14 canvas, something bigger than I'm working on. And so, you know, you just want to stick with the biggest brush you can use in any given area. Don't go too small. That gives you 100 brush strokes to make a mistake instead of just one. Just make one nice brush stroke.